Hello and welcome to episode 150 of Radio Gorepress. What are you giggling at?
It's immediately obvious how excited you are to cover this film just from the high energy intro.
High energy. Got to get people in, got to reel people in. We're a high energy podcast, guys. If you haven't heard us, shh. As far as they're concerned, yes, we are.
Yeah. We talk like children's TV presenters all the time.
I can see my sound peaking in audition.
Sorry. I think anybody that you drew in just bailed when I started talking. So I'll let you continue.
I am your host this week because this is the Phil show, as you will find out soon.
You are listening to Radio Phil Press, starring Phil Press. Phil. And also not Phil.
Phil's friend, not Phil. How are you doing, not Phil?
I'm good, Phil. How are you, Phil?
I'm good, not Phil.
This is going to get weird.
I know. Let's cut this off. No, I'm good. Just looking forward to doing this episode. To be honest, I think this is a film I've been wanting to do for a while now. So,
it kind of shocks me that it's taken us this long.
I know, it's been on the list for the longest time, and we've just kind of gone, oh yeah, that's a film we intended on talking about.
I think perhaps you sort of got, I was going to say something rude, you maybe sort of played on mine and Rosie's oppositional defiance, and you mentioned it too much.
And you're like, no, we're not doing it.
You can't make me. But, we figured it was time.
But before that, how are you doing, Sarah? Are you good?
I'm not bad. Work has picked up.
That's good.
It's a strange old time in the UK at the moment.
I know.
Deliveries are affected all over the place because of the apocalyptic fuel shortages. We're literally living Mad Max at the moment. Everything's kind of been going wrong. Like, everywhere you look, everything's just a little bit off. And it's a bit post-apocalyptic. Somebody was hit by a van outside one of the train stations on my way to work, and it was cordoned off all day. And there was fire engines, there was an air ambulance, all sorts. Oh, wow. And obviously, me being me, I was being a bit beaky. So I wanted to find out what happened, and I was Googling it on the local news. And I didn't find out initially. What I did find were reports of fights breaking out at petrol stations across Kent.
Of course.
And there's quite an interesting video of a chap clinging to somebody else's bonnet while they're driving, then getting off and kicking their wing mirror off whilst yelling profanities. So yeah, if you're not in the UK, don't come here. Everyone's gone mad.
Stay classy, Kent.
I'm guessing you're still working from home, so I don't know how much you've been affected by it.
Well,
Phil.
So here's the thing. I went to Cambridge this past weekend to see my parents, and the fuel shortage kind of hit last Thursday. We were due to leave on Saturday, and we had half a tank left, which probably, if we drove cautiously enough, could have got us there and back.
Yeah.
But we're like, do we risk it? Do we not risk it? And so we ended up kind of we ended up being one of those people and getting petrol. But it was for a reason. That's my defense. We weren't just panic buying to save it up to hoard it and stop other people from getting it.
Just keep it in canisters so you can charge people 3 times the price.
We actually genuinely needed it for a trip we were having over the weekend. So
it's crazy though, isn't it? Just who knew that Brexit might be a terrible idea?
Oh yeah. Who knew? Ugh.
And we have not seen the last of it yet, so we don't really need to watch horror films
I'm not even sure
currently.
We've seen the start of it.
Oh, don't. But yeah, we really don't need to watch horror films currently because just
live in the
world. Yeah. But because of fuel shortages, HGV driver shortages, all of this nonsense that's happening across the UK, people have it extends further than the UK. Obviously, postal services are massively short-staffed due to COVID still. So I think everybody's starting their Christmas shopping a little bit early.
Oh, okay.
So I normally around this time of year, quiet children, the cats are playing. How dare you? Normally around, I don't know, the start of November, I brace myself for a crazy influx of orders and long days and leaving work in the pitch black darkness. And I'm starting to wonder if that isn't kind of starting now. And it might end, maybe it'll taper off in November rather than start in November.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Hopefully with it being over a longer period of time, it's actually just more manageable. And it's just
I really hope so.
being kind of like pleasantly busy rather than having a mad rush.
Let's hope so, eh? I can do without that after the year we've all had.
Oh God, tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Dealing with unpleasant people on Etsy and going home crying every evening because my hands hurt from holding pliers all day.
People are the worst. And pliers, apparently.
Pliers suck. However, if it weren't for pliers, I wouldn't be able to do my job. So.
A necessary evil. Pliers are a necessary evil.
Put that on a t-shirt.
I was thinking that myself. Cool.
So, have you even told the good people which film we're covering?
I have not. I mean, they've presumably seen the title of this episode.
Not
so I'm
necessarily.
Sure just blindly clicking. You think someone's navigating the internet and just blindly clicking on links?
Maybe
and then
they're listening.
To stumble across it.
You don't know, Phil. You don't know. Maybe somebody's listening to this in 2023, and they've just left it on autoplay on YouTube. And it's cycled through them, and they're like, wonder what they're going to talk about this week.
That is a fair point.
You can never presume.
I will concede my statement.
Hurrah, winner.
So we are covering this week a film that like I said, we've been clamouring to cover for...
It's Cabin in the Woods.
The longest time. It's Cabin in the Woods.
Why am I such a brat? I don't know why I felt like I had to steal your thunder there.
I was hype, Sarah. I was building hype. Getting the energy levels up again.
Look, man, we've been hyping it for like 7 minutes. It was time.
5 of that was talking about politics.
Who even are we?
I know, right?
Who do we think we are?
So I think you have a synopsis for us.
I mean, so I've got the DVD in front of me, but the DVD synopsis is a bit pony. So I guess I'll give you what's on IMDb. Which is merely 5 friends go for a break at a remote cabin where they get more than they bargained for, discovering the truth behind the cabin in the woods. Which is equally pony, but at least it was succinct.
And props for keeping the story under wraps, I think.
They kept the mystery alive there, yeah.
So I don't know whether it was through accident or a deliberate effort. I think it may have been actually a deliberate effort, but I've been consciously trying to avoid any sort of like marketing for this film before it came out.
Okay.
Precisely for that reason. Like I think I knew there was something special about the movie, something a bit different. And given it was Joss Whedon that was written, I know. I was
later.
Young and naive. Given that he'd written and produced it, it was something I was very excited by. And so it was really fun going into this movie and having it kind of play out, seeing it play out in front of my eyes for the first time and not knowing anything about it.
I know, mate. I was there.
Were you?
We went to see this together.
Did we?
Yes.
It was a long time ago, Sarah.
Look, my memory is super weird. We know this.
I know, that's very true.
Yes, we went to see this with 2 of our friends at the Gulbenkian. And it was a fucking blast. And I think there were definitely some shared sort of excited glances.
Mm-hmm. So were you the same? Did you know anything about it beforehand, or?
I don't think I knew a huge amount. I can't really remember much about my first viewing because I've seen it so many times since.
Yeah.
But the one overriding memory I've got of watching this for the first time was it kind of tricked me because it kept feeling like it was ending.
Yeah.
And then something else happened and I was just like, what is even happening here?
But I think in the best way, there are films that kind of do that false ending and... Ooh.
Yeah, no, don't mistake me. Like I'm not saying it overstayed its welcome or like I wished it would end. It was just like, oh, this keeps escalating. What the fuck?
No, for sure. But the one that always jumps out, I think, was the third Lord of the Rings movie, I think.
Okay.
Or one of the Lord of the Rings movies. I can't remember which one. But
yes,
it kind of
I think
ends,
you're right.
And then it has this epilogue that lasts like half the film.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I thought this was ending. Is it carrying on still?
Yeah, he chucked that ring into the volcano 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
What is going on?
And so, like, I know what you mean about kind of films having that kind of like false ending, but this way, because that tension was built up and the plot escalated so much. Every ending was kind of it just made it all the better.
Yeah, it was like being on a roller coaster and you're expecting the drop, but it just keeps climbing and it's really confusing and you know the bottom's going to fall out of it at some point, but you don't know when. And on that note, actually, this is probably a really, really rare example of a film that I would have liked to have been like an hour longer.
Right.
Because it's like, what, an hour and a half?
It's a pretty short movie, actually.
And it feels it. Like, I'm always surprised how short it feels. Having, like, everything I've just said aside, I'm always surprised when I rewatch it just how short it feels. And you get to the end, because it, like, not a moment of screen time is wasted. It's very snappy. It's very straight to the point. But it gives you just enough. But yeah, I would have appreciated more of this world.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how I would feel about a sequel or like a spin-off or something, because I think it's perfect as it is.
Yeah.
But I would like do terrible things for a director's cut of this.
Right. I feel now's the time. We've managed to talk about this long enough.
Okay.
Avoiding spoilers. So before we carry on any further, if you haven't seen it, watch it. Don't listen to anything from this podcast. Go out and watch it. Come back and enjoy what we talk about. But
if you haven't seen it yet, equally though, what are you doing with your life?
I know. But this is one of those films you don't want spoiled. You know, you want to go in kind of completely blind to what goes on.
As blind as possible, for sure.
So the first thing that stood out to me was how different Bradley Whitford looks.
To what?
To these days, to now, to the present day.
I mean, he's definitely older.
but he doesn't, he looks, I mean, it's 10 years. It's only 10 years, right? And yet he's gone like completely white, got a beard now. And it's just...
Does he?
Well, what? Yeah?
I haven't seen him for a long time. We rarely speak, so...
That's fair. Yeah, you've fallen out of touch, you know. It's just one of those things. You know, you, friends come into your life and then they leave and...
Stuff happens. People change.
Have you not seen him in Handmaid's Tale?
I haven't seen any of Handmaid's Tale. Is that embarrassing?
Well, there you go. Watch that. What are you talking about? He's in Get Out, Sarah.
Oh, yeah.
And he's equally as white-bearded.
He doesn't look that much older in Get Out. Does he?
He's obviously he's got kind of reddish-brown hair, and this one he's kind of thin.
Maybe he dyed it.
White hair and a beard in Get Out.
Maybe he dyed it in Cabin in the Woods.
Did occur to me that he might have been dyeing it. But yeah, that was the first thing that stood out to me when I watched this movie.
Maybe just anybody that stands next to Richard Jenkins looks younger by comparison.
Because that's, Richard Jenkins looks identical in Shape
everything.
of Water.
Throughout his life. He's always looked that way. Oh, Shape of Water, man.
I
Such a
love
good
it
film.
so much. So much. This was a weird movie for me to watch because I don't think I realized exactly how much they signpost the actual twist.
What do you mean, like, until you watched it for the podcast with a more critical eye?
Or
you mean
just multiple times, you know?
Okay.
Because when I'm watching it, like you get a sense there's something different going on, but I don't know if it was because I was just too busy enjoying the experience or not quite paying as much attention as I should have done.
Yeah.
But the whole twist really comes out of the blue for me. And for saying they're in this office building right from the start and talking about things going wrong, like an entire country screwing up their thing, whatever that is, you know, clearly big things are going on behind the scenes, and they're pretty upfront with that from the start. But I don't think I got quite the significance and the impact
the
of
magnitude.
that. Yeah, until later on in the film.
I would say, in your defense, there's so much going on that it would be really difficult to take everything in just one watch.
I think that's probably there, you know, and that may be to do with kind of Whedon's writing style. He does tend to have kind of machine gun dialogue, doesn't he? And that I think really works because it doesn't really give you the chance to process what's being said, because there's always just another like one liner or kind of something to kind of distract you in a way.
Yeah, and like couple that with the non-stop like visuals. There's so much to take in. Like, it's almost a film, which it's weird to say because on the surface of it, it's very obvious. Like, there's no ambiguity. By the end of the film, you understand what's happened. It's not like something you need to pick apart and interpret. However, I would still say it's a film that kind of requires multiple viewings to fully appreciate, maybe.
Oh, for sure. Because because that's the thing, you know, the kind of A plot, as it were, the kind of plot involving the students is so recognizable and so familiar to countless other horror movies that have done similar things. It's almost quite easy to just forget about like the mundanity of this like office building that they're kind of shooting in. You know, you don't really. I certainly didn't. Didn't really notice the significance of that until a fair way into the movie.
So I'm going to branch off of that very quickly because you mentioned students. I have a question for you. Is it like a Joss Whedon thing that all of them look 30? Like, how mature are these students supposed to be? Or is it a comment on that type of film where they all tend to look a bit older, don't they?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, the casting for students, in inverted quotes, always skews a little bit older. So I'd be interested to know if that was... Because at its heart, it is kind of a satire. Would you call it a satire or a parody or an homage? I would say a satire because it's more... Because it's about... It's more of a commentary on the genre as a whole rather than a specific, like, thing that apes... Yeah, I didn't find it echoing a specific film too much. It was using all. I don't know. I think this is probably the best remake of Body Count that I've ever seen.
Have I seen Body Count?
We covered it like 3 weeks ago.
That's how forgettable it was. You're probably right. Yeah.
I'm just taking the piss, but that scene where they're in the RV at the beginning, I was just like, oh, this again.
One of them's going to get out and start skanking.
Oh God, I'm talking in a faux Southern Belle accent. No.
But yeah, like I think that's a fair kind of question. I haven't seen anything to support the idea that it was a conscious effort to cast older actors in younger roles. That being said, given what the film is about,
it wouldn't be
surprise
surprising.
me.
Yeah,
You know?
that's what I figured. I just wondered, because you know more about this film than I do, I just wondered if there'd like been any talk with is it Drew Goddard?
Yep, Drew Goddard directed it.
Or Joss Whedon about, just wondered if there'd been like I don't know, maybe a director's commentary or something where they cleared that up. I want to know these meaningless details.
Well, I think it's one of those things where, actually it's quite important to know, you know?
But again, like a lot of the film, it doesn't dampen the viewing to not know.
No, for sure.
And I'm definitely doing the thing where I'm trying to pick it apart too much and looking too intensely at it.
I don't think so. I think this is a film because, where would you put it? Would you put it a parody or a satire? Out of curiosity.
Right. So I think I probably would agree with you that it's a satire. I think it parodies elements of these stock... it's literally called The Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
It's basically a subgenre of horror at this point. The Cabin in the Woods subgenre. So it's definitely parodying a lot of stuff that became very familiar to horror audiences over the years. However, I don't know, the word parody in the context of film, to me, makes me think of like date movie.
Yeah.
And crap like that.
Exactly.
And so this film doesn't belong in that bracket, which is why I would probably call it a satire.
For sure, yeah, and that was my logic. Like, this is a film that is poking fun at the tropes of the subgenre in order to critique and examine it, and I think that's what I would say. I haven't looked at the specific definitions of satire versus parody, but that would be the thing that I would use to distinguish between them, because it's not like Airplane, for example. Airplane is a parody, right? It's very specifically about, I think it's a take on a specific film, right? And doesn't really say much about the genre as a whole, whereas Cabin in the Woods kind of has all these levels that, it's an enjoyable film on the surface, but also it says a lot about the subgenre as a whole. There's a bunch to kind of pick apart, and I think that to me is what kind of gives it that satirical edge.
I would agree with that. I think it's not satire in the same way that like Chris Morris or Armando Iannucci does satire, but it is far smarter than the average parody. Because, When I basically, I'm just going to echo what you've just said. When I think of parody, I think of things like Hot Shots, which literally apes scenes from like Top Gun, for example, or like Epic Movie, and they just copy the scene but make it silly.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, there is an accomplished writer and actors can pull that off. But it is very, for want of a better word, easy, because it's like, hey, look, this is that film that you like. Nudge, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Whereas,
it still takes a talented team to make it funny. But The Cabin in the Woods is kind of parody, but make it smart.
Yeah, it has got that edge that that allows it to be to kind of make a comment about the subgenre, really.
Actually, I think in a perfect world, there'd be a Venn diagram of satire, parody, and homage, and they would all overlap, and The Cabin in the Woods would be the only thing smack bang in the centre. How about that?
Can we have that
as a compromise?
Anything that isolates Cabin in the Woods as like a shining example of one specific thing.
I thought you'd be all right with that. I'm glad we agree.
I was quite surprised how, and this is a really weird thing to say because, like, where the film
I'm
goes,
bracing myself,
but quite how subtle this film is in a way. Like, it doesn't really wear its kind of meta-ness on its sleeves in the way that other films of like other kind of self-referential films do.
I don't know if I agree with that. If
You
maybe
it does
maybe
towards
like
the end. Sorry, I'm
like the first third.
Yeah,
I'd be inclined to agree with you. I think the point at which they meet the Harbinger, is it Mordecai?
Mordecai, yeah.
The point at which they meet him, and then obviously Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins have the speakerphone joke just after that. It becomes far more obvious. That's the tipping point for me. But yeah, up until that point, it is a bit more subtle.
Yeah. And, I think actually back to kind of your point about the casting, they did a good job of casting actors that aped the look of the archetypes whilst subverting the archetype. Like you can watch this film or watch the first third of the film and it actually manages to do a good job of kind of masking the fact that it's the slut, the jock, the clown, the nerd. The actual actors are cast really well because Frank Kranz, he was deliberately dressed. Yeah, I was reading up on this. Apparently he's ripped. Like,
oh yeah,
in this film he was
they
ripped.
Purposely didn't have him take his shirt off at the
lake scene.
Like yeah, because it would have looked too weird for him to be buff.
Yeah,
sad times.
Oh yeah, of course you would be disappointed by that.
But look, I'm going to make no bones about the fact that I fancy the arse off that man, even with that haircut.
But despite the fact that he is, I mean, he's probably not the best example because he does seem quite superficially, like the stereotypical stoner. But Chris Hemsworth, as an actor, you could see him playing the jock, right?
Oh, yeah.
But within minutes of meeting him, he's picking out these books from the bookcase and going, oh, yeah, you should read this. This is really interesting.
That's right. I just very briefly, I want to take this back to the body count episode.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. Get the PTSD out of the way.
That, Sarah.
But I think something that we brought up in that episode is really relevant here. And that's my biggest issue with those sorts of films is why the fuck would this group of people be friends? And Cabin in the Woods has an answer for that question because they don't become the archetypes until they've been tampered with. And so at the beginning of the film, it makes absolute sense that this group of people would know one another and be friends. And I love that. Because I just find it funny that that's literally a question we had very recently. And that's yet another thing that this film does really well.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like Dana, Kristen Connolly, as a kind of a woman, she's very she looks like she could play that kind of very virginal role. She's quite innocent looking, quite
doe-eyed.
Yeah, exactly. But again, you find out within 5-10 minutes of meeting her that she slept with her teacher, and it does this really good job of telegraphing what's going to happen through casting. Whilst the actual characterization at the start is at odds with that. And I think, again, it's just one of those things that hint at what's to come.
Yeah.
On a level that perhaps you are picking up on, but aren't...
Not consciously.
Not necessarily consciously,
Yeah, definitely. And it's not something that occurred to me on first watch. For sure, which again is why I think it's a film that does sort of demand repeat viewings. Do you know what? I appreciate the shit out of this film from minute one because I think it's a really smart way to introduce the film with really typically appropriate horror titles. Like the screen at the beginning is just like, oh, okay, so far so normal. And then you have that immediate juxtaposition between the credit sequence and like the really kind of jovial office banter. God, can we just Like, give those two men... Do you know, I would watch a spin-off show. Can we have a prequel TV show of just Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins, please? Just talking about his wife baby-proofing the kitchen. I'd watch the crap out of that.
They're so much fun, aren't they? Like,
they're brilliant.
But I think that's applicable to basically every single actor and actress in this.
I think they're
just so much fun to watch.
But those two are such a notably fun double act. But immediately, like, I appreciate the juxtaposition, the dichotomy between what you expect from a film called The Cabin in the Woods and then this immediate, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well,
this isn't what I expected.
It opens on the office scene of them, like, trundling around in their, like, office mobile, whatever that would be called.
I don't know, but Austin Powers would not have been able to turn in it.
And then the title sequence, it's the actual title card, is so kind of retro. Like, there's no fancy graphics to it. It's literally just The Cabin in the Woods, almost full screen, blood
accompanied
red,
by that jarring kind of noise,
like a scream sound effect or whatever. And again, like, that's the way kind of films would introduce themselves from the 70s.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
because they didn't have fancy graphics. They just had like a single like static title card that sat over video. You know, and again, that juxtaposition, as you say, between the light-hearted office banter scene and then this like very obvious homage to the kind of title screens from decades past, just again really ties in with the whole theme they're trying to establish.
I think they should have gone full method and just had like in tiny lettering underneath the tile screen, just like MGM Company, and then the date in Roman numerals, just to really make it authentic.
I have to say, I love it when films play around with the kind of like production company logos for whatever reason. I watched Van Helsing recently.
Oh no, why?
I really fucking enjoy Van Helsing. I'm
Someone
not ashamed.
had to.
I'm not ashamed to say.
You should
but
be.
I think they have the Universal logo that then kind of turns into the torch of a villager about to take on Frankenstein's castle. Like, it was just so cool.
That was the best bit of the film.
Shut up. I unashamedly love that movie. And we'll talk about it next minisode. So if you want to hear me defend Van Helsing, join our Patreon.
And if you want to hear me be contrary for the sake of it, listen to any of our episodes. It's almost like a personality trait at this point.
Yeah. So
speaking of the cast and the characters that they play, do you think Holden is a really uncommon name? Mm-hmm. Do we think that's sort of like a Catcher in the Rye reference? Because, you know, nerd, he reads books and he wears glasses.
I am not actually familiar. I haven't read Catcher in the Rye before, so I didn't pick up on that.
Controversial opinion, it's shit.
Okay. Then I perhaps might not read it at all.
It is the most pretentious book I've ever read, and I don't understand why people obsess over it. I really don't. But I just feel like it's quite fitting for that sort of character to perhaps be a reference to such a famous American novel that kind of appeals to intellectual but disenfranchised men.
If that's the case, then again, that's one of those things that perhaps subconsciously you pick up on, because, you know, if you are kind of more well-read than me, apparently, you might associate the name Holden with Catcher in the Rye, which is, again, is associated with kind of intellectual pursuits. And there's that jarring moment between the guy who's clearly quite athletic and sporty and the nerdy name that he's associated with.
And he's then a lot less self-important than Holden Caulfield.
That sets him up as the nerd, right? Even if you're not necessarily aware of that at the time, you know. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was a deliberate. Interesting.
I don't have anything to say about the rest of their names. I did, like, when I clocked that, I did have a think about whether any other character names could be symbolic, but
No luck?
Didn't necessarily. No, I mean, some of them are quite unusual. Dana's not a very common name either, is it?
No, not particularly.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure some thought went into that, but I couldn't tell you what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quite close to the beginning, actually. Just very quickly. The scene, as we're introduced to all of them, and they leave in the RV, and everything, despite the kind of that introductory scene with the office, or I keep calling it, it's not really an office, the facility.
Yeah.
Despite that, everything else is playing out as you would expect this sort of film to do. And then they suddenly pan out and you see the guy kind of surveilling them on the top of the roof. And I think that's so well done. That's such a cool little subtle reveal that kind of just makes you 100% sure at that point that, oh, not everything is quite as it seems.
I think that's what this film does really well, is just the constant escalation of the scope of the movie. Like, it goes from mundane kind of office facility banter to kind of the establishing of the characters, and then they get to the but then the scope, the actual scope of the movie gets bigger and bigger, and you suddenly find out by the end that actually they're in a fight for the survival of the entire world, and that's not something you would pick up on right from the start.
Definitely not. I've so much to say about that ending, but we'll get to it. Right, quick break then, because we did say we would come back to it. How do we feel about Joss Whedon these days? Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we?
Yeah, it's really, like, I've been a fan of his work, shall we say, because that's true. That still is true for a long while, since Buffy.
Look, you can think he's a really good screenwriter and a piece of shit. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive.
From what I've heard, I think that's just about right. You know, I think his writing style tends to be very similar, but then if that's what you enjoy, that's why all of his shows are quite enjoyable, and that's perhaps why people are so enamored by his shows, because he's got such a distinct writing style that chances are if you like the writing style of Buffy, you like the writing style of Firefly, you like the writing style of Dollhouse, because they're all roughly Joss Whedon, right?
I'm just, nobody can see me, I'm just sat here shaking my head.
No, I can't see you, frozen.
Oh no, it's probably for the best then. I still am of the firm opinion that the best thing he did, the best thing he wrote was the 1992 Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie.
Of course it was. Of course you are.
I'll be honest and say that I watched Buffy when it first aired because I was at about the right age for the target audience, and I enjoyed it. I've never finished watching it. I've never watched the final couple seasons because I really ran out of steam with it. And I've watched some of most of his other stuff. I've watched all of Firefly, which we obviously started talking about when the mini-sode cut off. I don't know how much we actually, don't know how much we got
far
through.
Enough for you to say, I preferred Serenity. And just about
and then Rosie lost her shit. So he's a writer that I always wanted to like more than I actually liked. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's your opinion.
But like a lot of my friends, yourself included, speak so highly of his work and like so many of his shows that I kind of felt like I was missing something. Like it was just like, well, so many of these people who are into the same stuff as me love this guy's work. What am I not getting? So I did persevere with some of it, but I'll be honest, a lot of it's just kind of over my head. I don't know. Maybe I need to persevere.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I watched Buffy as it was being aired on UK TV, and I was probably the exact target audience for a show like that. It's like Sarah Michelle Gellar as cool, pretty vampire slayer. This like supernatural ass kicking. You know, it was seemed very geared towards me. You know, towards me and my sort of my people. And I think because I was so into it during those like formative teenage years, it's got a very special place in my heart, and therefore, again, because I like his writing style and like grew up with his writing style, it's quite easy to find myself getting into Firefly and Dollhouse and all the shows that we've kind of spoken about, kind of previously. But I can see what you mean, because, you know, like he like Joss Whedon, I noted this down. He loves bathos, right? Like drama, undercut by one-liner. And you can see that in like, even to this day with Avengers, you know.
Right. This is a separate bone of contention. I think Joss Whedon was the worst thing that ever happened to the Avengers. Next to James Spader in a morph suit.
Interesting.
On a par. Yeah, I'm wondering if at some point it just became like an oppositional thing where I'm just like, well, I've wasted so much of my time on this man's work. Maybe I hate him now.
Yeah.
And maybe I tipped so far in the other direction.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I always found his concepts very interesting. I'll give him that.
Yeah, there's a few shows that I've been really gutted were cancelled. You know, I mean, obviously Firefly's the obvious one, but Dollhouse as well. Like, I think for those of you who haven't seen Dollhouse, it's really good. Can't say much about Elijah Dushku's acting.
Oh, it's terrible. She was the worst. Ironically, she was the worst part about the show.
Yeah,
the least interesting.
You know who the
part.
Best one was?
Frank Kranz.
And also something else as well.
I don't make me guess.
I really like. I'm like frantically looking at the actor's name. The guy who played Victor.
Oh yeah,
he was excellent. So for those of you who haven't seen it yet, roughly speaking, Dollhouse is a show that deals with a agency who effectively brainwash willing volunteers, I suppose, and hire them out to people to act as certain jobs, and they are have their personality replaced in each job they do. And so by that nature, the actors who have to play these roles should probably have a range to them, realistically.
Yeah.
And
to be fair, most of them did.
Yes, but Elijah Dushku
with one
didn't.
glaring exception.
That's the disappointing thing. Enver Gyoke was his name. He was really good.
He was in Would You Rather.
Okay. Was he good in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I enjoy that film.
Nice.
I don't know why that's relevant. Just as soon as you said that, I recognised the name.
Oh, okay.
I can picture him because he looks like a boxer.
Yeah.
He's got a boxer's face.
He does, doesn't he? But what happened with Dollhouse, I think it had 2 seasons, and because they knew the second season had been cancelled, what they did was they had like a flash forward, and you suddenly got a sense of where kind of Joss had intended on going with the show. And again, it's a shame because you get to the end and it's suddenly this big dramatic change that's happened, and you're like, I want to know what happened there, right? There's clearly something at work throughout that is hinted at. And it's the same with Firefly, right? You have all these hints that are dropped throughout that you kind of, it's really unsatisfactory that you never got that kind of explored fully, unless you kind of read the comics or watch Serenity. See,
my equivalent of that is Carnival.
Yeah, but that's you get the
I
point,
do.
Right?
The lack of closure is infuriating.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I think of Joss Whedon. Okay,
so to summarize, we are in agreement that it's okay to separate the art from the artist on this occasion.
I think so. We hinted. I think we spoke about it briefly when we were talking about Roman Polanski in the Omen episode. But ultimately, unless it's like a book, any kind of show, TV show, even music, is the
it's a collaborative process.
It's a collaborative effort of a whole bunch of people, and it's always I find it always a bit of a shame. And don't get me wrong, like I know I respect people who do distance themselves from certain things, and maybe certain things should be distanced from, because that's a whole other conversation. But it's a complicated, often a complicated thing to get your head around, isn't it?
I think the movie world is sort of an even more prominent example of that collaborative process, because I think a lot of films, like if a film looks good, for example, somebody's just like, oh, isn't the director really good at their job? Without necessarily factoring in a huge amount of that is going to be DOP, cinematographer, colorist. Score. Like it's not just the guy who's pointing and shooting that's making it look good. It's a whole host of other people.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, he can get in the bin. But Drew Goddard we're okay with, I guess.
I haven't heard a bad word said about Drew Goddard. I don't think I've heard much about Drew Goddard. So
salt of the earth.
I think I've said it before. I really liked how they foreshadowed the events of the movie. The key line that stood out to me was when kind of Marty was waxing lyrical about, in one of his like stoned ramblings, about how society's the worst and it needs to crumble.
He's not wrong.
Well, that's very true. But again, it's one of those lines that is so throwaway, and again rewards rewatching, because it's so throwaway when you're watching it for the first time. But then you get back to it, and it's like he literally caused society to crumble. Like that's literally his thing, right? And again, it's just there's so much of this movie that, like you say, does reward rewatching, because it's full of it knows what it is right from the start, and indeed it drops these hints throughout. But unless you know what's going to go on, it's impossible to pick up on them.
I want to skip a little bit ahead.
Okay.
And talk about what I'm presuming is your favourite scene, because you fucking bark on about it often enough.
I'd like to say that we're 48 minutes into the episode, and I think we've only just got past about quarter of an hour into the movie.
Go on, talk about the bit in the cellar.
So I love how you're like, can I just interrupt you to let you talk about something?
I'm just moving the conversation along. Okay. This is how conversations work, Philip.
So the cellar scene. Mm-hmm. I didn't pick up on how
symbolic,
kind of how satirical this film was until that moment, because it wasn't necessarily by the numbers. Like, there were a couple of recognizable things, but it didn't seem it seemed very I think that was the point in which I noticed there was something really deep going on, and the scope of the movie opened up, because
it's at that point that it becomes very subversive.
Yeah, because the way that the editing of that entire scene is just perfect, because they find themselves down in this cellar with all the junk around them, and they all pick up their own artifact, and all of a sudden, as a horror fan, I'm like, oh shit, that's like the Hellraiser puzzle box. And it's, oh shit, that's like, and you pick up on all these kind of like familiar objects that you recognize from other films. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, you get the association with where that's going. And it's like, oh, this film could go like a Hellraiser direction, or it could be an Evil Dead direction.
Can you imagine?
But this is the point, and this is why I was so. This is why that scene is so stand out to me, because
I've changed my mind. I don't want a director's cut. I want Cabin in the Woods, the Hellraiser edit.
But it's so. I mean, it's so rife for exploiting, because this is the film. This is like the end film. This is the culmination of the events. But ultimately, the whole Cabin in the Woods story takes place I can't remember if they say it in the film itself, but every X number of years. There are countless stories of other kids doing the same thing, finding the same things.
I'm going to say every 4 years.
Yeah.
How often is the Olympics?
I think it's every 4 years.
Let's go with that then.
This coincides with the Olympics completely coincidentally.
That's how they cover their tracks. Everyone's distracted by the gymnasts.
Perfect. Love it. But that's the scene where I was just so enthused by the movie because it just ignited this sense of scale in this when I was watching it. That
I know. I remember. I think you were sat next to me at the cinema.
To talk about a particular scene and then go, I know when I talk about that scene.
I'm just saying, like, I literally remember seeing this with you in the cinema, and I could like feel you bristling. It's like you were practically vibrating with excitement.
Yeah, I think I was. That was just the sense of scale that opened up from that scene. I adored so much because I love it when a film kind of rips the blanket out from under my feet. You know,
all right, then.
I wish I'd seen Dusk Till Dawn blind.
Oh, had that been spoiled for you?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, that's a shame.
But again, it's one of those films that like takes you one way and it's like, nope, you thought it was this thing, it isn't.
Psych.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's fascinating to watch because these films that do that well have foreshadowing and have all these kind of moments that point towards where the film is going, even if you don't notice them, you don't pick up on them.
You're not aware of it. Yeah. So, given that I would really love to see a Hellraiser edit, my question to you now is: were you satisfied with the direction that it went in, or would you, in a perfect world, have rather them explored one of the different monsters, I guess?
I think I would have not to disparage the film.
No,
but
of course
I think
not.
I would have preferred a different story just because and this is probably why they did it. The whole like zombie murder family has been done to death, right?
Yeah.
It's Evil Dead, right?
Yeah.
It's exactly the film that it's
do you know
pretending
what?
to be.
The Evil Dead connection hadn't even really hit me until watching it this time. I mean, obviously on a superficial level, but it wasn't until, because obviously Marty is my favourite character. Do I even need to say that at this point? He's just the MVP. But it wasn't until that point in the cellar where obviously he's the only one who's unaffected by the
tampering.
Yeah, I don't know what else to call it, because obviously they're sort of affecting them in slightly different ways, chemically, I guess.
Yeah, they're all being manipulated somehow, aren't they?
And it's at that point where he's just looking around going, guys, what are you doing? This isn't going to end well. And it's at that point I realised he was sort of like an inverse of, I guess to reference the Evil Dead remake, Lou Taylor Pucci's character, who's like the egghead one who's like, I'll read the Latin. And in this one, Marty's just like, don't read the Latin, guys.
I think this is why I love it, because it nods towards the cliches of films without going, look, they read the Latin in the Evil Dead. Like,
it's done without the obnoxious wink and the nudge.
I'm not saying this, it does have an obnoxious wink, but it's not like Scream, for example, where you've got a horror movie fan who is referencing horror movies and, oh God, it's a film that that kind of parodies horror movies. Yeah, you know what I mean?
In fairness, I don't remember that having been done before Scream. But yes, it is very much more on the nose in that instance.
Yeah.
We should cover Scream.
I'd be up for that.
So, are we going to talk about Chris Hemsworth for a second and how weird it is that he's in this film?
I know.
Considering this would have been made the same year as Thor.
Was it made? Because it was 2009, or 2011, sorry. That Cabin in the Woods was released, but it did sit
No, it didn't come out until later.
Oh, was it later?
I think it came out in like 2013, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Because for whatever reason, it was a really good year for horror, because Cabin in the Woods and obviously one of my favourites, You're Next, had both been languishing on shelves somewhere because nobody wanted to release them. So both of those films were made a couple of years before they actually came out, which blows my goddamn mind.
Yeah.
Like, who didn't want to release this film?
It's crazy, isn't it? I don't know if it was too out there. I mean, it seems like an odd to devote that much like love and attention to it.
I mean, I wouldn't even say it was like ahead of its time, because we'd seen meta horror done quite a few times by that point.
I think the only thing I would say it does a little differently is to critique the actual consumption of horror movies rather than just horror movies themselves, right? Do you know what I mean? I mean,
I do.
It's not necessarily a big difference.
I would argue that New Nightmare kind of did that in 94, though.
You might be right. I'm not as familiar with that movie. I've seen it.
Should be. It's great.
It is. I've seen it. I have seen it, but it's just not one of those ones that I am quite as familiar with. Because, I mean, jumping right ahead to the end, because we're talking about the symbolism and stuff at the moment, so it does make sense too. Obviously, Dana and Marty don't do as the kind of facility wish them to, and as such, the Ancient Ones are angered and destroy the world. It's then, you could then read it as the Ancient Ones as the actual audience of horror movies, the consumers wanting their cliches and wanting their.
Are we the real Lovecraftian monster the whole time?
I think that's the thing.
Oh no.
But yeah, we're clamoring for these deaths and boobs and these stereotypes, these archetypes. And we get angered when films don't do that. And then Dana and Marty are like the filmmakers who are daring to do something different and try and explore something new.
I like that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the reading that I've picked up, and that's kind of what I mean in that it's about horror consumption and the genre as a whole, rather than picking apart. It's a commentary
just
about
films
about
cabins in the woods.
Yeah. It seems like it's going that extra step that not other similar films don't do.
But that's kind of one of the best reasons for horror to exist, and that's why I believe this film is such a good example of the genre, because the best horror films have always held up a mirror.
For sure.
So that's why that interpretation really works.
Yeah, I mean, even outside of being self-referential, it's always horror, as we've said kind of before, but horror has always been really good at, like you say, holding up a mirror to society and showing what the fears of the particular era in which it's been released are. You know, again, I always jump back to it, but there's a reason why during like the AIDS crisis there was a lot of body horror being released because
and vampiric stuff.
Yeah, because it was all tied in with this fear of like your body being taken over by this horrific illness. You know, they often go hand in hand. Like the fears of a society are often hand in hand with specific subgenres of horror. You know?
Yeah, or even like some of the most obvious examples, like Dawn of the Dead being a comment on overconsumption.
Yeah,
quite literally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one thing the genre does fucking brilliantly when it's in the right hands.
For sure, yeah.
So, all right, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Would you ever, in a million years, dare to disobey Sigourney Weaver?
No. It's Sigourney Weaver, man.
I know. I was watching it last night,
Ripley
just
would
thinking,
end me.
Isn't it? Yeah. On my watch last night, I was just like, I think I'd just do whatever she said.
Yeah.
My own life be damned.
I did. laugh, and we're going to jump back again.
Okay.
I did laugh at the mirror scene because there's like Holden being all chivalrous and knightly when he's like, no, there's a one-way mirror in my room and I can see into yours while you're changing, and that makes me really uncomfortable. So let's swap rooms. And then as soon as they do, he proceeds to get changed.
You
it's like,
absolute tart.
You know exactly what you're doing right now, don't you?
Might as well start dancing.
I did enjoy that.
Also, controversial opinion.
Okay.
I wouldn't have minded that painting.
Right.
That's fine. That wouldn't have spooked me.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen any Hieronymus Bosch? Like,
right. It's
that's nothing.
It's going to be entirely pointless because I can't remember the name of the artist, but I think there's a more recent one who may be kind of Polish or Eastern European, and he does these amazing, really horrific paintings, and that's the point I'm making. I can't remember his name, so
what was the point of that?
Yeah. I'm going to look him up now.
You should. I'll pop it in the blurb when you find it. Why is the best scene in the film Richard Jenkins yelling obscenities at Japanese children through a TV?
I love that scene so much. But again, kind of the cleverness in which they not only pointed at Western horror movies, but also nodded at, because I mean 2011, we'd had the kind of J-horror remake Invasion. Mm-hmm. And so using archetypes and kind of cliches from other cultures is, again, it just goes to show how much they've thought about the genre as a whole. Like it was such a good way of pointing out how big this event is.
I was just about to say, actually, it was a really good way of literally signaling the magnitude of the entire thing. It's like, oh God, this is the whole planet. It's like, this isn't a localized US thing like you might have thought to begin with. This is the fate of mankind.
Yeah.
kind of a deal.
And again, right from the first scene, they're talking about how other countries have screwed up their event. And it's like, you don't realize how much of this is signposted until you give it another watch.
That's why the Olympics is such a great cover.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Every nation is tuning in.
So I found that painter.
Oh, go on.
And I'm going to mangle his name because he's Polish.
John Smith.
So his name is Zladislaw Bukinski, I think. And he does these really amazing hellscapes effectively. And they're spooky. And I really recommend...
Find one and I'll post it on our social media.
I will do that.
So the folks can see.
I will do that.
Let's share the horror. One thing that I really love, actually, is when things do start to go wrong. Particularly kind of in the second half of the film where they're trying to escape in the RV and the tunnel hasn't collapsed. And so you're seeing what's going on in the background and they're like, oh, we didn't get the signal from upstairs. And just seeing almost in real time the mechanics of the operation behind the scenes, as it were. I think that's really nicely done. And then obviously the flip side of that is Chris Hemsworth doing his hero bit and then failing spectacularly.
Did you expect that?
I don't think I expected it to play out quite like it did. I was obviously starting to suspect that things were not as they seem and it would go wrong. But yeah, it was a little bit of a shock.
Because it's interesting because by then you've already had that protective shell established because as they're driving the RV
you see the bird.
You see the bird flying in it. And I don't know if I can't remember whether I was like, oh, he's not going to survive. He's not going to make this because of this sci-fi shell that's keeping them in.
I think that's kind of testament to how well played the whole film is, though, because the bird thing at the start is subtle enough that you go, oh shit. but you wouldn't necessarily remember it by the time you get to that scene.
Yeah.
And then 2 and 2 make 5 or whatever, and you're just like, oh shit.
I don't know if you've ever had those films where you're like, you've really enjoyed the journey a film has taken you on, and you're desperate to show it to other people, and
always
you start it, and then you suddenly get paranoid that they're gonna know exactly what's gonna happen 10 minutes into the movie.
Yeah.
Always happens with me in Ink.
Really?
Like, yeah, every time I watch Ink, because I know what's gonna happen. If I'm showing Ink to someone else, I'm like, always got my fingers crossed that they don't pick up on what's happening.
When you say it always happens, but they don't like second guess it. I thought you were saying when you show it to people, they can predict what's going to happen and it ruins it.
I'm saying I always have my fingers
You're worried
crossed
that they will.
That they will. And I'm like,
right.
I was too dumb to work this out.
I genuinely, the first time I watched Ink, I thought the first 10 minutes were incomprehensible. I didn't know what I was watching. Oh, that's man, that wasn't even intentional.
But yeah, like that's what I find with this one as well, because again, because you do find those moments are so obvious when you know what's happening.
Oh yeah,
that
and even
it's hard to know what other people are thinking.
Even in hindsight, like as soon as it happens, you're like, oh, of course.
Yeah, yeah. I did enjoy, because obviously, you know, you find out that they are. Well, I mean, they talk about kind of chucking people in volcanoes, right? The concept of like these ancient ones who are constantly on the verge of just destroying society and being kept at bay by this kind of clandestine agency. You know, that thing is within the film demonstrably ancient. You know, it's been going on for centuries, and I did like. It was a really subtle moment, but just the labeling of the horror archetypes, because we are natural like vocabulary. We'd say, oh, it's the jock, it's the slut, it's the nerd, it's the clown. Whereas they're like, oh no, it's the athletes, and it's the fool and the scholar, and the
yeah. Like, I think
it was just a nice touch. It didn't need to happen, but it really nodded to the idea that this has been going on for so long. They are using a lot more like much more traditional terms.
I really liked that in and of itself, purely because it's not just films. I mean, obviously, human beings are far more nuanced and complex. You can't pigeonhole people. And yet we still do. We still try. Not necessarily we as in you and I, but people. Excuse you.
I'm sorry, I just swallowed some of my Coke. Went down the wrong pipe.
I was going to say, that's supposed to be what you do with Coke, right? What kind of Coke are we talking about?
I breathed in some of my Coca-Cola.
I think you're doing it wrong.
Inhaled, there we go. That was a disaster, Sarah.
It's fine, we can cut it out. Because we do that all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Very complex editing process. Yeah, but it is something that we try to do to people. Because in your own mind, having people fit into a neat box of what you think they are is kind of how a lot of people get through life. All of us make assumptions about people based on how they look, whether or not it's an active or conscious assumption. I think that's natural. That's human nature to do that. So it's interesting on that level as well. I mean, but once again, horror movies are a reflection of what's already happening. So I guess one begets the other.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, that's arguably where the kind of situation where you get people who are largely racist, except for their handful of like Muslim friends who are not that type of Muslim, you know, somehow
because
othering
they know them, so in their head they've managed to separate these people out.
This entire group of people, despite the fact that, as you say, people are nuanced and everyone has their own personality and traits and stuff, and yet somehow they're lumped into this one amorphous blob of, you know, whichever kind of subgroup of people they fall into.
Absolutely. It's like saying, I don't know. It's sort of saying, I don't hate white people. I've got loads of white friends. Really? I hate some white people because they're not all the same.
Yeah, that's how people are.
Yeah, it's very reductive of you to say that. But yeah, on a kind of a more simplistic scale, I suppose. I thought that was quite interesting. Did you lose your tiny mind?
Yes.
When they... at what point did you lose your tiny mind,
throughout.
should I say?
My mind was lost.
Just a series of... The Pixies, Where Is My Mind plays softly in the distance.
Yep.
I think for me, I lost my absolute shit when it came to that Marty wasn't dead.
Yeah. And it's such a kind of a heroic entrance, isn't it?
And I'm not saying this because I like the actor. I genuinely believe Marty to be one of my favourite horror movie characters of all time, of any movie. I think he's brilliant.
Why's that?
Just brilliantly written. I vibe with him. I just think he's cool.
Seems really cool.
Yeah. But I guess because he's the only one of them that's not being manipulated in any way, he to me is the most interesting one. And by extension, the savviest and obviously with the exception of Dana, better at survival. And I don't know, I think he's a really interesting character. But it was at that point where it kind of becomes obvious that he's still alive, he survived, and then they go into the elevator shaft and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Huh?
I guess that's part of the genius in the film, because how many times have you got utterly frustrated at the characters in a movie when they make the most dumb decisions you've ever made, you've ever seen? It's like, let's split up. No, that's a terrible idea. But with Marty, because this whole situation is manufactured, Marty stands out because...
Well, he's the audience's cipher because he's the only one that's speaking sense. And he's naturally the one we root for.
For sure. But also he's an insight into how well-written characters should act in these situations.
Yeah.
He's always doubting the dumb decisions that the other characters are being forced to make. Just in the same way that the kind of audiences do the same thing when a badly written character is doing dumb things. And so I think that's part of the reason why he's so easy to root for, because you're naturally aligned with him because of how critical he's being of these stupid decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's just incredibly rare in any horror film that I'm sad to see a character killed off. And I was sad. The first time I watched it, I was just like, oh, but he was the best one. Yeah. This is premature. This doesn't feel right. And then obviously the reveal happens and it's like, oh, I see you. I see you. I know what you're doing.
But it's just not, it's not just that scene where he's like, he saves the day. You've also got that intercut between that and the facility where shit's going down because all of a sudden they've realized their plan isn't going the way they've wanted it to. And so you've got this real sense of drama, not just that Dana's, I think it's Dana that's close to dying. You've got that drama. You've got something mysterious happening in the facility, and then all of a sudden Marty comes back, and it's just it's so rewarding, I love it.
I spent a little bit of time on Reddit, so I'm going to ask you your thoughts on this because it's not necessarily something that had occurred to me on previous watches. There was some talk on Reddit. They were old threads, but I like to do my thorough research. And people were talking about the potential of this whole thing being religious.
Okay.
And I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I think some of their reasoning is basically, at one point, apparently you see Richard Jenkins' character wearing a pendant and it's got the same symbol that's on the floor in the chamber at the end.
Okay.
I didn't clock that, so I can't verify that. But the information is online. And And so obviously there's the suggestion that it could be some sort of religious order. And I wondered how you felt about that. Or perhaps, to be honest, personally, I don't necessarily lean towards religion. Because it's a worldwide thing, I see it more as like an Illuminati type shady organization.
That's where I'd lean. I think with an organization that's like as clandestine as this one, naturally, I think the people who are involved won't just like walk away and talk about it with their partners at the end of the day. Like, this is something that you live day in, day out, because you've got the entire weight of the survival of the world on your shoulders. And I think that is a role that you need to properly throw yourself into in order to do well, and therefore, and just, how would you even recruit for something like that? You'd probably have people.
It would have to be somebody in the know recruiting people quite carefully.
Yeah, but you'd have, and therefore, like, being part of this secret organization will. And actually, you know what? It would be a badge of honor, right? If you knew you were responsible for overseeing the survival of the entire world, I think you would feel proud. Like, yes, they get their hands dirty, and things go wrong, but they are the good guys, as it were.
Yeah, maybe they're banking on it being so outlandish that they wouldn't be believed. So perhaps it is advertised on LinkedIn, and only the odd few people are going to inquire, because most people would look at it and go, "You want me to save the what now? That doesn't sound right. Move along." So maybe they are really brazen about it because it's so outlandish.
Maybe.
Also, I think there are some pretty hefty NDAs involved. Realistically speaking.
So.
I solemnly swear. etc.
What about you? Where do you think they're kind of like a cult? Is that your?
I think cult makes more sense than religion. Yeah.
They never seem to demonstrate any sort of specific worship. I mean, they.
Well, they do and they don't, because I can't remember what the line is, but after something goes horribly wrong, like somebody dies and they kind of say like
a prayer.
Kind of.
Yeah.
There's this line of like very official old sounding dialogue, and you get the impression that they say it after each time this happens, and it is quite a somber thing. It's not something they necessarily take lightly in between yelling about tequila. So it does seem ritualistic in the same way that a lot of religions are.
Well, yeah, but they specifically mention rituals in the film itself, right? They talk about volcanoes and throwing people in volcanoes. Like, the point was the ritual has changed with society as the audience's tastes have changed. The audience being the actual audience, and both. And the kind of the ancient ones that are living underneath the earth, as their tastes have changed, so does the ritual, because, what was chucking people in volcanoes has now become, horror movies, effectively.
I suppose it could be a religion, though, couldn't it? Because, like any religion, I mean, none of them had necessarily seen proof of it, right? The world had never ended before, obviously.
True.
Assuming they'd never seen the Ancient Ones, or the Elder Gods, or whatever they're called. So, much like any religion, there's no proof. It's blind faith.
I mean, there is a response. You can, like, when things don't go to plan, there's that rumbling of just the entire
I guess so.
facility, because something's angry beneath the earth.
I guess my answer is I'm torn.
That's fair.
I'm unsure.
That's fair.
It's definitely interesting to contemplate, though, and I hadn't thought about it before this time.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, I think I look at them as like a cult. They don't seem to venerate these gods or pray to them in any way. It's just they're aware
fearful.
They're fearful. They're angry. That these gods get angry and threaten to me. They're more like custodians, I suppose, or guardians.
It's kind of a dick move, though. Like, what kind of god just sits around going, I need human sacrifices on the reg, otherwise I'm going to obliterate you? That's a real dick move.
But then how, that's, how many movies have gone south because they are too, what's the word? Too cerebral.
So.
These mainstream movies, there's a reason. What Cabin in the Woods is saying is there's a reason these movies, these kind of blockbuster movies, these slasher movies have similar deaths and similar archetypes and boobs, and because that's what the audience, the elder gods want.
Dumb it down.
Yeah.
I guess so.
And the point is that Marty and Dana are, as the directors in inverted commas, as the filmmakers, are wanting to do something different and move away from this kind of machine of pushing out largely the same movie every 4 years,
Out of all of the many, many, many monsters that come out of the lifts, which one is your favourite? What's your favourite death? Is it the merman?
No, but I did enjoy that. I did like, because again, the setup and the punchline of that was amazing.
I'm quite fond of the stabby unicorn.
Yeah, but I think that's just the kind of like juxtaposition of this very
whimsical,
traditionally noble creature, this like guardian of the woodlands, who then just like impales an entire person,
fucking people up left, right, and centre with his horn.
I don't think I enjoy one specific thing. I just enjoy the carnage of it all, because so many bits of this movie seem so far removed from each other, and yet as a whole they fit really well. Yeah, and so
bizarrely well, actually.
Yeah, like that whole the elevator sequence is so different to the film it starts out as. Is so different, and the whole kind of slasher story is so different to the facility. Like, it's almost like there are 3 or 4 different movies going on at once, and they just
must have been
so well.
Difficult, quite a feat to make it cohesive.
I think that they get away with it because how kind of skillfully they ramp up the tension, they ramp up the scale of it, because then that carnage at the end feels deserved, because you see Marty and Dana go through so much shit throughout the entire movie and see their friends die and see horrible things happening, and then they're trapped and alone in this facility, like almost certain death awaiting them, and you're rooting for them. You are totally rooting for them, and so that kind of like big red button is such a release as an audience, because it's them getting their own back, right?
I am pretty much at the end of my notes now.
Okay.
Have you got anything else you want to talk about?
I mean, probably.
Yeah, but I mean, we can't be here for 5 hours, sadly. Is there anything sort of pertinent that you will kick yourself if you don't mention?
Nothing on my notes.
Okay.
But I'm sure there will be something that I'll remember like halfway through the night.
All right, then. Well, to start wrapping us up, what would you do in that situation? Because I know what I would do.
Which specific situation?
At the end, I would let the world burn. I've literally had this conversation with people in real life. I think extinction can't happen soon enough. I think we should let the animals have the planet back. They deserve it more than we do. Humans are a scourge.
Right. I think I've been increasingly pissed off and upset with the way the world's going recently. So
the older I get, the more misanthropic I get. So that's absolutely the ending that I would choose. You think it wouldn't be possible, and yet here I am. So would you try and save the world, or would you just let it happen?
I think I'd like to, well, I would probably save it, knowing me, martyr myself for the good of the planet.
Such a Boy Scout.
I know.
I agree with Marty. I think well, Marty and Dana, I think humans have had long enough.
I think you're right.
Is there much point wrapping up?
I guess not. I mean, we've been...
This is normally the part where we talk about, would we recommend this film? Did we like this film? I'm not sure that's necessary.
I think you're right. What was your favorite? I didn't ask you. What was your favorite? Was it The Mermaid? Did you say?
Ooh, if I had to pick one, I am very fond of the guy with the saw blades in his face.
Fornicus. His name was Fornicus.
How did you know that?
Lord of Bondage and Pain. I looked that up. But that's
so Pinhead.
Well, that's the thing. The work they put in, the actual work, because that cube sequence where,
oh god, you would have to pause that a million times over.
But all of those creatures are real effects. They had like 3 different scales of cube, like one that fits almost like was head shaped to make things seem really big, one that was massive to make things seem really small. And then they just played with that, and there were like a bunch of like Left 4 Dead creatures in there.
I love that. I was so happy because there's a boomer, isn't there?
Yeah, I
was so stoked when I spotted that the first time.
But just
all right then, the boomer. You don't see much of him, but that's my favourite.
It's fair. But yeah, I mean that's a whole other conversation, I suppose. Did you know that if IMDb's trivia is to be believed, Heather Langenkamp was in the crew of this film.
Was she doing what?
She's part of the like special effects makeup crew.
For real?
Yeah.
Is that what she does now?
Because her husband is actually one of the creatures in one of the cubes. So I think she was part of the.
That's wild. So I wasn't far off when I was talking about New Nightmare.
No,
Jesus.
That's very true.
That's so cool.
I think it's probably time to wrap this up.
Yeah, okay. Well, what are we going to say then? Good work, Zombie Arm.
Pretty much. I mean, it's such a clever movie. I've never been... It's rare that I've been so... And this is realistically why I'm so enthusiastic about it. It's just rare that I've been so like inspired and fired up by a movie and the direction the movie's going. And it was such a buzz watching this for the first time. And we should probably explain, come to think of it, why we're constantly referencing Cabin in the Woods as a comparison for other movies. Because I realise we've got...
Because that's just your gold standard. That's your barometer, right?
No, it's not.
Long story short, we went to see It Follows at the cinema, which I loved and Phil did not love. It was a midnight showing, but I think you had consumed more of the advertising, the marketing that I had. And there was some particular marketing that had compared it favourably to Cabin in the Woods. So because Phil didn't love It Follows as much as I did, we left, and his first words were, well, it wasn't as good as Cabin in the Woods.
I think the specific wording was something along the lines of, like it had the same level of kind of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just as good as, it was, it was to do with the way what the film had to say.
Yeah, but that's not as funny.
You're right, that isn't as funny.
I'm allowed to crib from the past and make it suit my narrative now. That's how it works.
Okay, fair enough.
Right, so I guess to sum up, I will say I don't love it quite as much as you do. It would be a solid 4.5 out of 5, though. It's not perfect, but it's an objectively solid film.
Yeah.
And I think if you're into horror films and you don't get anything out of The Cabin in the Woods, then you don't have a soul. Sorry.
Or haven't seen enough horror movies.
I'm blown away that there is any hate for this movie. And there is some, because I've seen it. And it never fails to surprise me. I think even if you don't love it, it's just a really solid film. And it's just one that stands up to... I've seen it so many times at this point, and it never gets old. So for that, 3 thumbs up.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm much the same. It's a weird one, and I think this is back to the whole conversation we've had about like things objectively and subjectively being good. Like, I would change things about this movie if I could.
Yeah.
That being said, I would happily give it a 5 out of 5. You know,
would you a full perfect score?
I think so. I think there are a few films I've enjoyed. Like I said, I've enjoyed and been inspired by, been fired up by as much as this one. And I don't know. I often find it difficult to rate films like this in similar ways because
in your mind, this is on a par with Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah,
which is another
100%.
running joke that I'm not going to explain.
Yeah, like it's trying to kind of balance my subjective feelings versus objectively how good the film is.
I think you can score it however you want.
Thank you. I'm just going to score it 5 out of 5 then.
I don't think you need to justify it. If you think it's a 5, mate, it's a 5.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
I'm surprised, speaking of which, I'm surprised how low it scored on Letterboxd.
Me too. I was expecting the average to be higher. I haven't actually read the reviews because I didn't want them to colour my opinion before recording.
Same.
But I'm going to do that tonight.
Average of 3.5 out of 5.
That's not bad for horror.
Yeah.
That's not bad for horror. But horror always gets marked lower.
But then you'd expect Cabin in the Woods to be the horror fans' horror.
Yeah, but the thing you've got to understand about horror films, though, is it's one of those genres that I hate myself for saying this. It's one of those genres that normies watch at like Halloween, or they want to go and have an experience and be scared at the cinema.
Yeah.
And if you're not really into that, you're going to view it more critically and mark it down. And so they fuck the average. It always happens. And that's not me being judgmental or critical. People like what they like, but I do find that's definitely something that happens with the horror genre specifically. Anyway, we've talked for fucking ages.
Right, it's been a blast talking with you, Sarah, about one of my favourite movies.
Yes.
Hope you guys have enjoyed it and hope you guys have got something out of it. And obviously, if you guys have got anything you'd like to say, any participation you'd like to provide, feel free to find us on social media or on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter.
Come and tell us your favourite monster from the movie.
Got comments, come say hi. We until next time, I suppose. I don't know what we've quite got planned in 2 weeks' time.
I know what we've got planned.
Okay.
I may share it, may not. Who knows?
We did talk about it before this episode, so I probably should know.
We should stop now because my cat wants to make an appearance.
Until next time, stay spooky.
Bye, guys.